Is PS Plus about to get another upgrade? What's going on with this DualSense Pro? Is Sony skipping another convention? I have all the latest info on God of War Ragnarok, and Horizon Forbidden West just got another great update. And before I jump into it all, I want to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by me. Yes, I have so many links down in my description for any PS5 accessory you might need. How's it going, guys? Welcome to PSReady, the channel all about PlayStation. This is my weekly news roundup video, obviously from a different location. I am here on vacation in Michigan at my parents' place. So yeah, you'll have to forgive me for not having the usual brick wall or Halloween decorations behind me. So there's been a lot of talk lately about Sony skipping pretty much every convention out there. So I think this has been more of a rolling thing over the past few years. It started with E3. They had a big E3 showcase where they only showed off 3 games. It was The Last of Us Part 2, I'm pretty sure Spider-Man and Ghost of Tsushima. They moved journalists from like big tent to big tent. They tried to make a big event out of it, like a sports announcement type thing, and it did not really land all that well, which caused them to basically pull out of E3 entirely in favor of state of plays and these showcases they do every summer where they show off big PS5 games that are pretty much exclusively coming to PlayStation. The issue is E3 isn't the only big convention that happens every year. We have Gamescom in Germany, and we also have TGS. And I guess you could count Summer Games Fest. It's kind of like replaced E3 the past few years. And now we know that next year E3 is coming back and it's being run by the same company that runs Star Wars Celebration. So maybe it'll be a cool event, but it's kind of crazy because it's running at literally the exact same time in pretty much the same place, it seems, as Summer Games Fest, but they're both going to be in person. So we'll have to kind of pick and choose if you want to go to either of these events, which one you'll go to, and kind of see which one gets what games, because you know, it's going to be a bloodbath. There's no other way to put it. But regardless, Sony has traditionally gone and shown up at Tokyo Game Show, at least with something to show off. But as far as Tokyo Game Show goes, it kind of seems like that was the last one Sony would actually have any real presence at. They've had Gamescom showings over the past few years, and they've been at Tokyo Game Show. This year they're skipping Gamescom, and it looks like this year they're not entirely skipping TGS, but they're going to have more of a limited presence. I guess it kind of makes sense because a lot of their biggest games that are first party, at least, that would sell well in Japan have already kind of come out. And I just have a feeling that God of War Ragnarok or The Last of Us Part 1 aren't going to be the biggest hits over in Japan. You know, those are very Western oriented games with Kratos and Joel and Ellie. You know, these are very Americanized stories. So they're also having a huge issue still in Japan where they can't get enough PS5s out into the wild, to the point where the Xbox Series X and S are outselling the PlayStation, which seems kind of crazy since Japan is the home of PlayStation itself. But over the past few years, there's been a big shift inside Sony where the focus has gone on to the US side of things, or at least the US and Europe. We saw this with the PS4, which was the first Sony console in a really long time to launch in the US before it launched in Japan. Honestly, I'm fine with Sony skipping these shows, especially TGS. I used to have to stay up super late, like 2, 3 in the morning when I was in college and I was here in Michigan. I would have to wait super late, and Sony would always be like, oh, we're not going to show anything important at TGS. Don't worry, anyone. You don't need to stay up for this. And then I would stay up and see that they would announce a new revision of the PlayStation Vita or something like that. So I'm kind of glad they're consolidating this down into at least state of plays, the showcase events, and sometimes Summer Games Fest for some reason. That's where they announced The Last of Us Part 1. That's where they announced the director's cut of Death Stranding. I'm fine with that. I think that's a good amount of announcement type events. Next up, let's talk about God of War Ragnarok. So we've had rumors on rumors on rumors of some sort of showcase event happening where God of War Ragnarok alongside the DualSense Pro would be announced, maybe with 17 to 18 minutes of gameplay like we got last year with Horizon Forbidden West. But no, Sony just announced it on a blog post, the release date and the collector's editions, some of the pricing that we'll see. But yeah, this was kind of like a little bit lackluster of an announcement, in my opinion. I mean, all the info is the same as we would have gotten at some sort of showcase, but I think people really want to see some God of War Ragnarok gameplay. And while we did get a new cinematic trailer, which is really, really cool, yeah, we didn't get any new gameplay. And this game's coming out in November. We're getting The Last of Us in September, just before Halloween, when it's super relevant. And then we're going to get God of War Ragnarok in November, right around Thanksgiving. It's taking up the fall spot that was left by Redfall and Starfield, which is great for Sony. I mean, I don't really know what the right move for Xbox is here. I'm sure they're kind of scrambling to get at least something out this fall, but with games like God of War Ragnarok and The Last of Us Part 1, I mean, The Last of Us, I know people are upset, myself included, that you're just getting the single player for $70. I think this game's gonna sell pretty well, especially with people who have never played it and are excited for the HBO show. And then God of War Ragnarok is one of the biggest trailer viewer counts that Sony's ever had. I think people are really excited for this game, despite the fact that it's coming to both PS4 and PS5. But going back to that CGI trailer we got, it was actually really cool. There was a shot that I loved in particular with Kratos and Atreus. They're standing in the silhouette of a giant wolf. I don't know if that's going to be a boss fight or if that's going to be one of those classic movie moments where a giant wolf or something scary-ish comes out of the woods and you have that tense moment where you think it's going to be a fight, but then the wolf starts talking and is actually your friend. It kind of had that vibe to me, but it would be awesome to see God of War's take on Sif the Wolf from Dark Souls. That's basically my favorite boss, pretty much ever. And then you can go save him when he's a baby and it's sweet. But one thing that was similar to Horizon Forbidden West is we got all of the additions of this game announced, and this time it doesn't seem like there's a huge controversy over pricing, which is a step in the right direction for Sony. First off, if you pre-order the game, no matter what, you're going to get 2 skins, one for Kratos and one for Atreus. They look pretty cool. Next up is the Digital Deluxe Edition. This one has even more skins that are called the Dark Blade set, and then you also get a digital soundtrack, a digital mini art book, an avatar set, and a PS4 theme. Next up is the Collector's Edition, and this is where things start getting interesting because there's actually 2 Collector's Editions for this game, but the first one, or I guess both of them, include a replica of the Mjolnir from the game, which is awesome. You also get a steelbook display case, 2-inch Vanir Twins carvings, a dwarven dice set, and like I mentioned, a 16-inch Mjolnir replica. Now, Sony actually does a really good job with statue type stuff like this, like pack-in items, so I might be picking this one up. We just have to see the price, which unfortunately wasn't revealed. And finally, the last and most expensive collector's edition we've got is the Jotnar edition of the game. It comes with everything that was already listed on top of a 7-inch vinyl record with music by Bear McCreary, the Falcon, Bear, and Wolf pin set, the legendary Dropnir ring, Brock's dice set, a Yggdrasil cloth map, and a steelbook display case. This one's going to be hella expensive, but it looks really cool. The issue with all of these collector's editions though is that they don't come with a disc for the game. We've recently seen this with the Horizon Forbidden West PS5 bundle. I don't know, it seems like we're rapidly approaching this all digital future whether we like it or not. It just seems weird to include a steelbook and then not an actual disc to go along with it. Let me know if I'm crazy down in the comments, but yeah, I would love a disc with either of these collector's editions because they look really cool and I'm probably gonna have to pre-order one. So if you want one, make sure you keep an eye on the PlayStation Direct store because yeah, they're gonna sell out quick. Next up, let's talk about the DualSense Pro. So the dust has now settled on this whole in-zone reveal event that Sony had. We got 3 new headsets, 2 new monitors, they're PS5 themed, and all of it is overpriced in my opinion. People were also expecting though, this DualSense Pro, that every big leaker who have leaked stuff like God of War's release date, these in-zone monitors themselves, have been pretty correct on, and we haven't heard anything. The biggest events people were kind of connecting, myself included, were the God of War release date event reveal thing that was rumored that ended up just being a blog post, and then that would be connected to this DualSense Pro announcement. Because we've seen stuff happen like this before, like Sony will pair up the new faceplate colors with a trailer event or a state of play, or they paired up the Midnight Black and Cosmic Red controller announcements with gameplay announcements as well. They've done stuff like that before. It makes sense why people were connecting these dots, but now that we just got a blog post, everyone's kind of sitting here wondering if we're going to see this announcement soon or if this announcement is even real. And man, I don't know, I feel like this controller is real. We've had way too many leaks from credible sources that this thing is happening. I just don't understand why Sony hasn't announced it yet. The only thing I can think of is just looking at the Xbox side of the fence. They announced they're having a controller shortage, so you're only going to be able to get Xbox Series S and X controllers from certain retailers for a few months, it seems like, at least. So if that's going on with Xbox, it would stand to reason that it's also happening to Sony, because it's an issue that Microsoft can't just throw money at to fix like they did the supply chain issues with the Xbox Series X and S. So knowing that, maybe Sony wants to make sure that if they announce and release this controller pretty soon after the announcement, that people will actually be able to walk into stores and find this thing, because they're already having a PR nightmare with the PS5 itself. They definitely don't need another one with this DualSense Pro controller. But with games like The Last of Us Part 1 and God of War Ragnarok coming out, those are huge games for for Sony, I don't think they're gonna let this fall go by without having a DualSense Pro controller, especially with big games also coming to PC like Spider-Man Remastered and Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, which is rumored to be coming out in October. They're going to want to have a controller to pair up with that because at this point they're running laps around Microsoft on PC ports, and while that is pretty embarrassing, it's just a fact. They'll want to have a controller people can pair up with their PC, a Pro controller that is, and I feel like that's why we're going to see it by the end of this year. Next up, let's talk about Horizon Forbidden West, which has just gotten yet another graphics upgrade, which is a really good one. So the upgrade itself comes with a lot of different fixes, but the two most notable things are VRR support and a 40 FPS mode. Now, with PS5 being constantly marketed as a 60 FPS console, you kind of wonder why you would want a 40 FPS mode instead of like 30 FPS mode. I've talked about this a lot on my other channel, Deck Ready, but basically 40 FPS is basically the perfect point between 30 FPS and 60 FPS. Each frame shows for 25 milliseconds and you can show one frame at a time instead of doubling up frames like you have to generally with 30 FPS mode. And also, if you run a game at 40 FPS, it feels very similar to 60 FPS versus feeling similar to 30 FPS. So you can get smooth frame rates and smooth camera panning and all of the benefits of having a higher frame rate, but you can also keep on high resolution like 4K or ray tracing and all these other effects you have to turn off unless you're running the game at around 30 FPS. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was the first PS5 game to do this, and I feel like it kind of started a revolution with people where they realized 40 FPS honestly isn't all that bad. It's much better than 30 FPS, and if you are someone who likes ray tracing and all these other big graphic improvements like 4K resolution, it kind of is a good trade-off versus a very noticeable one, which is switching from 60 to 30. The only downside to this is that you actually need a 120 Hertz TV to take advantage of 40 FPS because it divides evenly into 120 Hertz and it doesn't divide evenly into 60 Hertz. On the Steam Deck, you can actually just switch the refresh rate of the screen of the device to 40 Hertz and then it caps out at 40 FPS, but not a lot of modern TVs have that feature. Either way, it's a small trade-off for a better looking game, and I think that's cool. So finally, let's talk about this big PS Plus upgrade. So I would say the launch of PS Plus Essential, Extra, and Premium has largely gone over pretty well. There are some issues like PS Now's streaming catalog being reduced, and also there was that whole controversy with PAL games being uploaded for the retro side, but Sony has kind of addressed all of those things by just talking about the future of the service, and I think largely, again, it's pretty good. The one biggest issue it has though is that you have to stream PS3 games, and Sony, it seems like they were waiting to see how many people would be upset about this, and we've heard rumors like immediately after this service was announced that they were looking at hiring an engineer or a new team or something internally to get PS3 emulation working on the PS5. And it seems like those rumors were true because a job listing just came out that basically says they are hiring someone to work on PS3 emulation for the PS5. Now, I know it's kind of weird to sit here and be like, oh, I want old games on my brand new console, especially when they're 2 generations old, but some of Sony's best franchises are currently stranded on the PlayStation 3. We've got Metal Gear Solid, we've got the first 2 Infamous games, we've got the entire Resistance trilogy. The list goes on and on of great games that were released during the PS3 generation that honestly, I feel like a lot of people missed because the Xbox 360 was so popular at the beginning. Then Sony launched with a $600 console. No one really picked up the early games for the console. And yeah, they released a ton of great stuff right in the middle, but then when stuff like Uncharted 3 started coming out, that's when people jumped on board. And I feel like there's a ton of games, again, that people missed that would be really cool to see emulated on the PlayStation 5. Obviously, the issues there are working with online stuff, like if a game has an online multiplayer mode, they've got to figure out how to either A, turn that back on, or B, strip it out of a game entirely. Also, the fact that the PS3 has a really tough to work with processor, which was called the Cell processor. The only developer who really seemed to figure it out in a really cool way was Naughty Dog. They really pushed the PS3 to its limits, but other developers, not so much. There's obviously a ton of other caveats, but anyone with a PC or even a Steam Deck right now can download a really good PS3 emulator, so I think it's fair for us to expect Sony to figure it out internally because they're Sony, they're PlayStation. They had a PS2 inside of a PS3 and they were actually selling that at one point, and I feel like we could get to the same point with the PS5 if we really needed to, because having the only option be to pirate games or figure out how to plug in a PS3 in 2022, that is just not a great option, and I'm glad that Sony is hiring someone to do this. They're basically doing fine against their competition, Nintendo and Xbox, which is great, but that basically means they can sit there and not really listen to their community because people are buying the console regardless of what they change. So it's good to see that they're going back to the drawing board on certain things, giving us new firmware updates, and also making sure they bring PS3 emulation to the PS5, because once we get there, then we can start talking about Vita emulation, which is what I really want. The Vita works totally fine on a TV. They released a TV compatible PlayStation Vita called the PlayStation TV, and it was sweet. So I'd love to see something like that come back.